Something deep inside Tejo broke when his son died, but it was not just his heart or his mind. It was something older and more dangerous that had been sleeping in human DNA for millions of years, the part of humanity that had survived ice ages, and predators, and wars by becoming the most deadly hunters the universe had ever created. The tears stopped flowing from his eyes. The shaking in his hands became perfectly still. His breathing slowed to the rhythm of a predator stalking prey. The peaceful mechanic who had spent 15 years fixing machines and raising his son with love and patience was gone forever. In his place stood something the galaxy had never seen before. Tejo rose from his knees with movements that were slow and deliberate, like a machine powering up after years of sleep. His eyes swept across the workshop, taking in every tool, every weapon, every possible advantage, with the calculating mind of a born killer. The Kalari soldiers were still laughing about. Their successful mission commander Vextar was giving orders to his troops about searching the next building when he noticed the change in the human. The alien commander had seen many different species break under pressure, but this was something different. The human's grief had transformed into something cold and focused and terrifying. "Clean up this mess," Vextar ordered his soldiers while keeping one eye on Tejo. "Then we continue the search of this colony. There may be more rebel sympathizers, hiding weapons and training young terrorists like this one." The commander gestured dismissively at Do Hyun's small body, but Tejo was already moving toward his workbench where tools hung in perfect order on metal hooks. His hand closed around a plasma cutting torch that he used every day to slice through metal and weld joints. The tool hummed to life with superheated energy that could cut through starship armor. The first Kalari soldier died before he could even turn around. The plasma beam cut through his neck armor like it was made of soft butter. The alien's scream echoed through the workshop as molten metal and flesh hissed together. The other soldiers spun around in shock as their teammate collapsed. "The human has gone insane," one soldier shouted in the Kalari language while reaching for his weapon. But Tejo moved faster than fear or training could respond. His 15 years of working with dangerous machinery had taught him exactly how different materials would break. Under pressure, a heavy wrench became a club that shattered the second soldier's helmet and the skull underneath. The Kalari fell backwards, spraying blue blood across the concrete floor as his brain leaked out through cracked bone. Tejo felt no satisfaction or remorse, only cold calculation about which target to eliminate next. Return fire killed the human. Vextar screamed at his remaining soldiers, but panic had taken hold of the trained military unit. They had never faced an enemy like this. Before, the human's rage was not wild or desperate, but focused with surgical precision that turned ordinary tools into instruments of death. Tejo rolled behind a heavy engine block as energy beams scorched the air where he had been standing. The soldiers' weapons were powerful, but they were designed for long-range combat, not close quarters, fighting in a cluttered workshop against someone who knew every hiding spot. And shortcut, a cutting laser became a sword that sliced through armor joints, where the Kalari designers had left gaps for mobility. Another soldier fell screaming as superheated metal burned through his internal organs. The workshop filled with the smell of melting plastic and alien blood as the massacre continued. The remaining soldiers tried to coordinate their attack, but Tejo moved through his own workspace like a ghost who knew every shadow and corner. He used the hanging chains from overhead cranes to swing between positions faster than the aliens could track his movements. Even simple screwdrivers became deadly weapons when thrown with perfect accuracy at the weak points in Kalari anatomy. The aliens had studied human physiology for military purposes, but they had never bothered to learn how fragile their own bodies were to someone with detailed mechanical knowledge. Commander Vextar watched his elite soldiers die one by one at the hands of a grieving father with nothing but workshop tools. The human moved like death itself, flowing from target to target without wasted motion or unnecessary violence. Each kill was efficient and final. "This is impossible," the commander whispered, as another of his soldiers fell with a power drill buried in his brain. The Kalari military had conquered dozens of worlds and defeated armies equipped with advanced weapons, but they had never faced the primal fury of a human parent whose child had been murdered. Taeho emerged from behind a pile of machine parts covered in alien blood but moving with the same deadly calm that had carried him through the first minutes of slaughter. His eyes locked onto Commander Vextar with the focused intensity of a hunting animal that had found its primary target. The workshop had become a slaughterhouse, littered with the bodies of soldiers who thought they were invincible. The tools that Taeho had used every day to fix machines and help his neighbors had been transformed into instruments of perfect vengeance against those who had destroyed his world outside. The colonists watched in stunned silence as impossible sounds came from the repair shop. The crack of breaking bones, the hiss of cutting torches, the screams of dying aliens who had thought humans were weak and helpless creatures that could be terrorized without consequence. Something ancient and terrible had awakened in the species that had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain through violence and cunning. The Federation was about to learn that there were worse things than rebels, hiding in the darkness between stars. Commander Vextar found himself alone in the workshop, surrounded by the bodies of his elite soldiers. The human mechanic stood 20 feet away, holding a plasma torch that dripped with molten alien metal. The Kalari commander had fought in 3 Galactic wars, but he had never seen anything like the creature that used to be a peaceful father. 5 minutes, Taeho said in a voice that sounded like grinding stone. 5 minutes ago you murdered my son and thought you were safe behind your armor and weapons and Federation authority. 5 minutes was all it took for 12 of your best soldiers to die, screaming in their own blood. The commander tried to raise his weapon, but his hands were shaking too badly to aim properly. Fear had taken hold of his nervous system like a poison that made his muscles weak and uncoordinated. He had seen Taeho move through trained warriors like they were helpless children, and now it was his turn to face the monster. Please, the alien begged, using the same word that Taeho had spoken when pleading for his son's life. I was following Federation protocol. Rebel sympathizers must be eliminated before they can spread their poison to other colonies. I had no choice but to carry out my orders. Taeho stepped forward over the body of a soldier whose skull had been crushed by a simple hammer. The tools in his hands were ordinary objects that any mechanic would recognize, but they had become extensions of human fury that could not be stopped or reasoned with. You had a choice, Taeho replied as he advanced toward the cowering commander. You could have arrested me. You could have investigated your evidence. You could have shown mercy to an innocent child, but you chose to murder a 12-year-old boy to teach other humans a lesson about fear. Vex. Tar scrambled backward until his armored body hit the wall of the workshop. His green eyes darted around looking for escape routes, but the human had positioned himself to block the only exit. The commander was trapped with a predator that had already killed 11 of his soldiers, using nothing but hand tools. The Federation will hunt you down for this, the alien commander threatened, desperately trying to regain some authority, even as death approached. Every ship in the fleet will come looking for the human who murdered a patrol unit. You will never escape justice for these crimes. Taeho laughed, but the sound held no humor, only the cold satisfaction of a hunter who had cornered his prey. Justice, he repeated as if the word was poisonous in his mouth. You call it justice when you plant evidence and murder children. You call it justice when you terrorize innocent families for your own amusement. The plasma torch ignited in Taeho's hand, casting blue light across his blood-splattered face. The human had become something from the nightmares of civilized species, a creature that could kill trained soldiers with improvised weapons and feel no remorse for the destruction he caused. This is human justice, Taeho said as he raised the torch toward the alien who had destroyed his world. The superheated beam cut through Vextar's armor and into his chest cavity. The commander screamed as his internal organs boiled and his blue blood turned to steam in the terrible heat. The workshop fell silent as the last Federation soldier died among the scattered tools and broken dreams that had once represented a peaceful life. The only sounds were the hiss of cooling metal and the distant voices of colonists gathering outside the repair shop. Tae-ho dropped the plasma torch and walked to where his son lay among the debris of their former life. Do-hyun looked small and fragile, with his eyes closed and his hands folded. Across his chest, the boy who had dreamed of flying between the stars would never wake up again. The father knelt beside his dead son and began to sing a lullaby that his wife had hummed years ago when Do-hyun was just a baby. The melody was soft and gentle, completely different from the violence that had just ended 12 alien lives in the same room. Outside the workshop, other colonists finally found the courage to approach the building where impossible sounds had echoed for 5 minutes. They peered through windows and doorways to see a human father holding his murdered child's hand, while surrounded by the bodies of Federation soldiers. Mrs. Chen was the first to enter the blood-soaked workspace. She had watched the aliens kill the innocent boy, and now she saw what happened when someone pushed humanity too far. 12 trained warriors in advanced armor had been butchered by a grieving father with nothing but workshop tools. The news of what happened in Tae-ho's repair shop spread through the colony like wildfire. Then it jumped to other worlds as traders and travelers carried the story to every corner of Federation space. The tale grew with each telling, but the core remained the same. A human mechanic had killed a dozen alien soldiers with his bare hands and simple tools after they murdered his son for no reason. The Federation tried to suppress the story, calling it rebel propaganda, but the truth had already taken root in the minds of every species in the galaxy. Other alien commanders began to look at their human subjects with new eyes, wondering what sleeping violence lay hidden behind peaceful faces. The humans themselves started to remember that their ancestors had conquered an entire world through cunning and ruthlessness before they ever reached the Stars Federation. Reinforcement ships were already approaching New Busan as Tae-ho sat beside his son's body, singing soft songs and waiting for whatever came next. He would probably be arrested and executed for killing Federation soldiers, but the galaxy would never forget what he had accomplished. In the darkness between stars, other human fathers heard the story and felt something stir in their hearts. The Federation had learned that there were worse things than rebels hiding in the shadows of space. They had awakened something primal and dangerous in a species that looked weak, but had never forgotten how to kill. The workshop, where a peaceful mechanic had become a legend, was quiet, now except for the sound of a father's voice singing his child to sleep one last time. The age of human submission to alien authority had ended in 5 minutes of perfect violence that would echo through history forever. The workshop fell silent, except for the humming of alien weapons and the sound of Tae-ho's heart beating so loud he thought everyone could hear it. Commander Vex-Tar held the planted device like it was proof of the worst crimes imaginable. His green eyes showed no mercy or doubt about what he planned to do next. 2 Kalari soldiers grabbed Do-hyun by his small arms and pulled him away from his father. The boy cried out in surprise and fear as the rough alien hands dragged him toward the center of the workshop where all the soldiers could see him clearly. The child looked so tiny, surrounded by towering armored figures with glowing weapons. Dad Do-hyun called out with terror in his voice that cut through Tae-ho's heart like a knife. The boy did not understand why these supposed peacekeepers were treating him like an enemy. He had always believed Federation soldiers were heroes who protected innocent people from danger. "Let him go," Tae-ho shouted, trying to rush forward, but more soldiers blocked his path with weapons pointed at his chest. "He is just a child. He does not know anything about weapons or smuggling or rebels. He only cares about machines and dreams of flying among the stars." Someday, Commander Vex-Tar drew his personal sidearm from its holster on his belt. The weapon was sleek and deadly with blue energy cells that pulsed with lethal power. It was designed to kill efficiently without leaving much evidence behind. The commander aimed it directly at the 12-year bag. Old boy who trembled in the soldier's grip. Federation justice must be swift and complete, Vextar announced to his troops like he was giving a lesson to new recruits. Rebels and their families are a cancer that spreads through colonies if we do not. Cut it out completely. This child has been raised by a criminal and will grow up to hate the Federation. Please. Teho begged, falling to his knees on the concrete floor among the scattered tools and broken parts. Take me instead, arrest me, execute. Me do whatever you think is right. But my son is innocent. He has never hurt anyone or broken any laws. He just wants to help people and explore space. The alien commander seemed to enjoy watching the human father beg for his child's life. Humans are so weak and emotional, Vextar said with disgust in his voice. You cry and plead like animals instead of accepting justice with dignity. This is why your species will never be truly equal in the Federation. Du Hyun looked at his father with wide, frightened eyes that still held love and trust, despite the terrible situation. The boy was trying to be brave like the space heroes he read about in his books, but he was too young and too scared to hide his tears. I love you, Dad, he whispered. The words hit Teho harder than any physical blow could have. His son was saying goodbye because they both knew what was about to happen. The Federation soldiers were going to murder an innocent child in front of his father as punishment for crimes that never happened. This will serve as a lesson to other smugglers on this colony, Vextar declared as he steadied his aim. The weapon hummed with deadly energy, ready to end a young life that had just begun. Everyone will know what happens to families who defy Federation law and order. Other colonists had gathered outside the workshop, drawn by the sounds of the search but too afraid to intervene. They watched through windows and doorways as their neighbors were destroyed by the very forces that were supposed to protect them. The Federation had become a monster that devoured the innocent. I was following orders, Vextar said, as if he was already practicing his defense for what he was about to do. The child was corrupted by rebel influence and would have grown up to threaten galactic peace. Better to end the threat now before it can spread to other young minds. The energy weapon charged with a high-pitched whine that seemed to go on forever. Teho watched helplessly as the man who was supposed to uphold justice prepared to commit the ultimate crime against an innocent child. The world slowed down as if time itself was trying to prevent this horrible moment. Du Hyun closed his eyes and whispered a prayer his mother had taught him years ago. Before she died, the boy was facing death with more courage than the armed soldiers surrounding him. His small voice carried across the workshop like a bell ringing in the darkness. The blue energy beam shot from Vextar's weapon and struck Do Hyun in the center of his chest. The child fell backwards onto the concrete floor without making a sound. His small body landed among the tools he had used to help his father repair machines and make their neighbors' lives better. Dad was the last word that came from Do Hyun's lips before the light faded from his eyes forever. The boy who had dreamed of flying between the stars would never grow up to explore the galaxy or help other people. His innocent life had been ended by the cruelty of beings who called themselves peacekeepers. Silence filled the workshop like a tomb as Teho stared at his son's motionless body. The Kalari soldiers holstered their weapons, thinking their work was finished. They had killed a human child to teach other colonists. A lesson about obedience to Federation authority time stopped for the father who knelt on the concrete floor, looking at everything he had ever loved, lying dead among scattered tools and broken dreams. The peaceful mechanic who had raised his son with kindness and hope was gone forever. Something else was taking his place. The colonists outside began to weep and pray as they witnessed the murder of an innocent child by soldiers wearing Federation uniforms. The trust between humans and their alien protectors died in that workshop, along with a 12-year-old boy who had never harmed anyone. Commander Vex Tar smiled with satisfaction as he put his weapon away. The lesson had been delivered, and the rebels would think twice before hiding. Contraband in this colony again. He turned to give orders to his soldiers, not noticing that something fundamental had changed in the human kneeling beside his dead son. The Kalari soldiers entered Taiho's repair shop like a storm of blue metal and flashing weapons. They moved with purpose that felt more like destruction than investigation. Their heavy boots crushed small parts that had fallen to the floor, and their armored hands swept tools off tables without any care for the damage they caused. Du-hyun pressed himself against his father's side as the aliens filled the workspace that had always felt safe and warm. The boy watched with growing fear as strangers tore through everything he had helped his father organize. Over the years, toolboxes were emptied onto the concrete floor and spare parts were scattered like worthless trash. Commander Vex Tar stood in the center of the chaos, directing his soldiers with sharp hand gestures and clicking sounds in the Kalari language. His green eyes moved over every surface, looking for something that would prove his suspicions about the peaceful human mechanic. Taiho could feel the commander's hatred like heat from a fire. The soldiers worked methodically through each section of the shop. They pulled apart engines that were waiting to be repaired and dumped out containers of nuts and bolts that had taken years to collect and sort. One soldier used his weapon to cut open boxes that were clearly labeled as containing harmless machine parts. "Why do they have to break everything?" Du-hyun whispered so quietly that only his father could hear. The boy was trying not to cry as he watched. His favorite place in the world being destroyed by beings who seemed to enjoy causing pain. Taeho squeezed his son's shoulder gently, but could not find words to explain such cruelty. A young Kalari soldier named Zekron was searching through a toolbox. Near the back wall of the shop, he was smaller than the other soldiers and seemed nervous about being part of such a violent search. His hands shook slightly as he moved tools around, looking for anything that might be considered dangerous or illegal. Suddenly, Zekron made a loud clicking sound that meant he had found something important. All the other soldiers stopped what they were doing and turned to look at him. The young alien held up a small metal device that gleamed in the workshop lights. It was about the size of a human's hand and covered with intricate markings. "Commander, look at this," Zekron called out in the human language so everyone could understand. "I found this weapon component hidden in the toolbox. It was wrapped in cloth and placed under other tools like someone was trying to hide it from Federation authorities." Taeho felt his blood turn to ice as he stared at the device in the soldier's hand. He had never seen that object before in his entire life. His toolbox contained only the basic equipment he used every day to repair machines. Nothing in his shop could be used to make weapons or help criminals. "That's not mine," Taeho said quickly, stepping forward but stopping when several soldiers pointed their weapons at him. "Someone must have planted that device in my toolbox during your search. I have never seen it before, and I would never help smugglers or rebels against the Federation." Commander Vex Tar walked over and took the device from Zekron, examining it with his cold, green eyes. A smile spread across his blue face that showed sharp teeth, like a predator who had found wounded prey. "This is definitely a weapon component," he announced to his soldiers. "Illegal technology used by rebels to build guns that can kill Federation peacekeepers." The other soldiers made approval, sounds in their clicking language as their commander held up the evidence that would destroy an innocent man's life. Taeho felt panic rising in his chest because he knew that no one would believe his word against a Federation military commander who had already decided he was guilty. "Please listen to me," Taeho said, trying to keep his voice calm even though his heart was pounding. "I have lived on this colony for 15 years. Ask anyone in town about my character. I fix farming equipment and hover trucks. I have never owned a weapon or broken any Federation laws, but Vex Tar was not interested in listening to human explanations. "Lying is what all criminals do when they are caught," he declared with satisfaction in his voice. "You hide weapons, you train rebels, you poison young minds against Federation peace and order. His accusations fell like hammer blows that could not be stopped or reasoned with. Do-hyun looked up at his father, with frightened eyes that did not understand how such terrible things could be happening. The boy had always believed that good people were protected by justice and that evil people were punished by the law. But these soldiers wearing Federation uniforms were acting like the villains in his storybooks. The device in Vextar's hand was small, but it would destroy their entire world. Tai-ho could see the cruel satisfaction in the commander's eyes as he realized that an innocent family was about to be crushed by false accusations and planted evidence. The alien enjoyed having power over helpless humans. "You are under arrest for weapons smuggling and supporting rebel activities against the Federation," Vextar announced formally as if he was reading from a script. "The penalty for these crimes is severe, and your family will be investigated for involvement in your illegal activities." Terror filled Tai-ho's heart as he realized the soldiers were not just accusing him, but also threatening. His innocent son, Do-hyun, had never hurt anyone in his 12 years of life. The boy dreamed of exploring space and helping people, not fighting wars or breaking laws. Yet these aliens saw him as a potential criminal just because he was human. "My son knows nothing about any of this," Tai-ho pleaded desperately. "He is just a child who helps me repair machines. He dreams of becoming a pilot someday and seeing the galaxy in peace. Please do not involve him in whatever you think I have done wrong." The commander laughed with a sound like breaking glass, showing that he found human suffering amusing. "Criminals always claim their families are innocent," he said with mock pity in his voice. "But rebel activities are usually family businesses. Children learn hatred from their parents and grow up to become terrorists themselves." More soldiers moved to surround Tai-ho and Do-hyun, cutting off any chance of escape. The workshop that had been their sanctuary was now a trap filled with hostile aliens, who had already decided their fate. The peaceful life they had built together was crumbling like a house made of sand. The next morning started like any other day, but everything changed when the Federation patrol ships appeared in the sky over New Busan. The ships were huge and dark against the morning light, casting long shadows over the peaceful farming colony. Tai-ho was drinking his coffee when he heard the deep rumbling sound of military engines landing at the spaceport. Do-hyun pressed his face against the kitchen window, watching the ships with wide, curious eyes. "Dad, look at those big ships," he said, with excitement in his voice. "They must be from the Federation fleet." Tai-ho felt a cold feeling in his stomach because military ships only came when there was trouble, but he did not want to scare his son. The ships landed with thunderous booms that shook the ground and rattled the windows of every building in the colony. Dust clouds rose into the air as the massive vessels settled onto the landing pads. People came out of their houses to see what was happening. Children pointed at the ships, while adults whispered to each other with worried faces. Soon alien soldiers began pouring out of the ships. They wore heavy blue armor that covered their bodies from head to foot and carried weapons that hummed with dangerous energy. The soldiers were Kalari, which was an old race that had been part of the Federation for hundreds of years. Their blue skin was visible through the face shields of their helmets, and their movements were quick and purposeful. The leader of the soldiers was tall, even for a Kalari, and his armor was decorated with symbols that showed his high rank. His name was Commander Vextar, and his green eyes were cold and cruel as he looked around at the human colony. He spoke to his soldiers in their clicking language, while pointing toward different parts of the town. "We have reports of illegal weapons being smuggled through this colony," Vextar announced in his harsh voice that carried across the settlement. His words were in basic galactic language that all Federation citizens had to learn. "Every building will be searched, every person will be questioned. Anyone who resists will be arrested." The soldiers spread out through New Busan, moving from house to house like a blue wave of metal and weapons. They kicked down doors that were locked and threw belongings around as they searched for hidden contraband. The colonists stood back and watched helplessly as their homes were torn apart by the military forces. Tae-ho told Do-hyun to stay inside the house while he watched from the repair shop. The boy obeyed but kept looking out the windows as the soldiers got closer to their part of town. The search was not gentle or respectful. The Kalari treated the human colonists like they were already criminals who just had not been caught. Yet Mrs. Chen from down the street was crying as soldiers threw her furniture onto the ground, looking for secret compartments. Her husband tried to protest, but a soldier pushed him away with the barrel of his weapon. The old man fell down and his wife helped him stand up, while tears ran down both their faces. The Baker family had their entire kitchen destroyed when soldiers decided their pantry might be hiding weapon parts. Food was scattered everywhere, and their young daughter cried as her favorite toys were broken by careless alien hands. The soldiers laughed at the little girl's tears like it was funny to see humans suffer. When the soldiers reached the mechanic shop next to Tae-ho's place, they found nothing illegal, but they still broke expensive equipment and scattered tools across the floor. The owner, Mr. Park, tried to explain that the tools were for fixing machines not making weapons, but the soldiers did not care about his explanations. Do-hyun could not stay inside anymore and came out to stand beside his father. The boy was scared, but trying to be brave, like the space heroes in his books. Tae-ho put his arm around his son's shoulders, feeling the boy tremble slightly as they watched their neighbors being treated badly by the Federation forces. "Why are they being so mean?" Dad Do-hyun whispered. Tae-ho did not have a good answer because he had always believed the Federation was supposed to protect people, not terrorize them. The soldiers were supposed to keep peace between different worlds, but these Kalari seemed to enjoy causing fear and pain. A group of soldiers approached their repair shop, and Tae-ho felt his heart start beating faster. He had nothing illegal in his workshop, just tools and spare parts for fixing machines. But the way the soldiers were acting made him worry that having nothing to hide might not be enough to keep his family safe. Commander Vex Tar walked up to Tae-ho with heavy footsteps that echoed off the concrete. The alien commander was much taller than any human, and his presence felt threatening, even though he had not drawn his weapon yet. His green eyes looked at Tae-ho and Do-hyun like they were insects that might need to be stepped on. "You are the mechanic who runs this shop," Vex Tar said in his grinding voice that sounded like metal scraping against stone. Tae-ho nodded and tried to keep his voice steady as he answered, "Yes, sir, I repair hover trucks and farming equipment for the colonists. I have all my licenses and permits in order." The commander did not seem interested in permits or licenses. "We search everywhere," he declared with authority that could not be questioned. "You hide weapons, you help smugglers, you train rebels. Against Federation law." His accusations were like hammer blows that made no sense to Tae-ho, who had never broken any laws. Do-hyun stayed close to his father as more soldiers surrounded their shop. The boy was no longer excited about seeing real Federation forces. He could feel the danger in the air like electricity before a storm. His small hand gripped his father's shirt as the aliens prepared to tear through their home and workshop search all you want. Tae-ho said as calmly as he could, "Manage, we're just mechanics here. We fix things that are broken. We don't hurt anyone or break any laws." The soldiers ignored his words and began entering the shop with their weapons ready as if they expected to find dangerous criminals hiding behind every tool rack. The peaceful morning had become a nightmare, and Tae-ho knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The Federation soldiers had brought fear and violence to their quiet world, and there was nothing a simple mechanic could do to stop them from destroying everything he had worked so hard to build. Kim Tae-ho woke up every morning at 6, when the twin suns of New Busan started to rise over the rolling hills. The light came through his small bedroom window and painted everything gold. He stretched his arms and yawned before getting out of his simple bed. The house was quiet because his 12-year-old son Do-hyun was still sleeping in the next room. Tae-ho walked to the kitchen and made coffee using beans that grew on the local farms. The smell filled the small house and made him smile. He had been living on this colony planet for 15 years now. Ever since his wife died from the red fever that swept through the outer colonies he had been raising, Do-hyun alone, but he never felt lonely when his boy was around the kitchen. Was simple with old furniture that Tae-ho had repaired himself many times. The walls were covered with drawings that Do-hyun had made over the years, pictures of spaceships and alien worlds and brave explorers flying between the stars. The boy had such big dreams for someone so young. Tae-ho loved listening to those dreams even when they made his heart ache a little. Do-hyun came stumbling into the kitchen with messy hair and sleepy eyes. He wore old clothes that were getting too small for his growing body, but they were clean and comfortable. The boy rubbed his eyes and sat down at the wooden table that wobbled slightly because one leg was shorter than the others. "Good morning, Dad," Do-hyun said with a yawn that made him look like a baby lion. Tae-ho ruffled his son's dark hair and poured him a glass of milk that came from the alien creatures the colonists raised. The milk was blue, but it tasted sweet and gave growing children strong bones. "Today we fixed the Martinez family's hover," Truck Tae-ho told his son while making breakfast. "The engine makes bad noises, and the family needs it to carry their crops to market." Do-hyun nodded seriously because he took his job as his father's helper very seriously, even though he was still just a child. They ate breakfast together while watching the morning news on an old screen that flickered sometimes. The news talked about peaceful trade between different worlds and new colonies being built in distant star systems. Everything seemed calm and safe in the galaxy. The Federation kept peace between all the different alien races, and humans were grateful to be part of such a big family. After breakfast, they walked to Tae-ho's repair shop, which was connected to their house by a covered walkway. The shop smelled like oil and metal and old machines. It was full of tools that hung on every wall and spare parts that filled boxes and shelves. Everything had its place, and Tae-ho knew where to find anything he needed even in the dark. Do-hyun grabbed his small toolbox that his father had made for him and followed Tae-ho to where the hover truck waited outside. The truck was old and painted bright yellow, but the engine underneath was making grinding sounds that meant something was broken. Inside, the Martinez family depended on this truck to make their living. "Look here," Do-hyun Tae-ho said as he opened the engine compartment. "See how this part is worn down? When metal rubs against metal too much, it gets smooth and cannot grip properly." Do-hyun leaned in close and nodded as his father explained how machines worked. The boy asked good questions and remembered everything he learned. They worked together for 2 hours, replacing worn parts and adjusting connections that had come loose. Do-hyun handed his father tools and held flashlights to shine light into dark corners of the engine. His small hands could reach places that Tae-ho's big hands could not get to. They made a good team. While they worked, cargo ships flew overhead carrying goods between the colonies and the main Federation worlds. Do-hyun always stopped what he was doing to watch the ships disappear into the sky. His eyes would get dreamy, and Tae-ho knew the boy was imagining himself piloting one of those ships someday. "Want to see the ice worlds, Dad," Do-hyun said as he watched a particularly large ship pass by, and the desert planets with 3 moons, and maybe even Earth where humans first came from. Tae-ho smiled because his son had such wonderful curiosity about the universe. "You will see all those places someday," Tae-ho promised. "But first, you need to learn how things work down here on the ground. A good pilot knows about engines and computers and how to fix things when they break in space." Do-hyun nodded seriously and went back to helping with the truck. The Martinez family came to pick up their truck in the afternoon. They were happy that it ran quietly again and paid Tae-ho with fresh vegetables from their farm and some credits that he could use. To buy parts for other repairs, Mrs. Martinez always brought cookies for Do-hyun because she said growing boys needed extra sweets. That evening, father and son sat on their front porch watching the sunset, paint the sky purple and orange. The air was warm and full of the sounds of insects and night birds calling to each other in the distance. It was peaceful and perfect, and exactly the kind of life Tai-ho had dreamed about when he first came to New Busan. Do-hyun was reading a book about famous space explorers, while Tai-ho fixed a small radio that belonged to their neighbor. The work was easy and relaxing after a good day in the shop. Both of them were content with their simple life together on this quiet farming world. The boy looked up from his book and asked Dad, "Do you think aliens ever get lonely like humans do?" Tai-ho thought about the question while his hands continued working on the radio. He had met many different alien species during his years on New Busan. Most of them were kind and peaceful, just trying to make good lives for their families. "I think all thinking beings feel lonely," sometimes he answered. "But that's why families are so important. We take care of each other and make sure nobody has to face the universe." Alone, Do-hyun smiled and went back to reading his book, while fireflies began to dance in the growing darkness. This was their world, simple and quiet and full of love. A father and son who had everything they needed in each other and their small place in the galaxy. Neither of them knew that tomorrow would bring Federation patrol ships and alien soldiers who would change their lives forever. Tonight there was only peace and the sound of night insects singing in the warm air.